My struggle was with the idea of fluidity being celebrated as something that is very liberating and virtuous. My question is, well, for some people, for some time. Now, what if the same fluidity turns around, several years later on me, and I so regret the physical decisions that are irreversible that I took in that state of fluid flux?
Imagine a world where we're all born with our sexual respective sexual organs and all of that, and we were all raised in ways that didn't keep telling you that you're a man, you wear blue color clothes, you wear shorts, you wear shoes, you go to this particular school, you go to this, you use this particular washroom. There is so much socialization from the moment we're born till our marriage and even beyond, that we're constantly told what we are. So if that was never reiterated to you constantly, do you think your how else would you have verified to yourself that yeah, I'm a man? what
Hey,
what
that was a
makes
good
you
question.
so
That was a
sure?
good question. Yeah, now I'm excited to hear what Charles has to say. Hello, guys. We're so excited for this session with two of my friends. We have Rahel and Charles with us. So good to have you guys here, man. Okay, before we just jump into the session, I'll just ask Rahel, what do you do and where you from and all of that? Yeah.
Hello, it's so nice to be here. Thank you, Lloyd, for doing this very necessary conversation. And happy Pride to those who are watching. June is Pride Month, and it's a great time right now. And I'm Rahel. I am from Bangalore. I'm a student of psychology. I'm working in mental health, and I work with the queer community. I work with students along the lines of mental health education. And I used to teach before that. And yeah, I also do performance poetry, and all of these actions are centered around the idea that every every intention, every action towards compassion counts to make the world a more accepting, more kinder place. And in the past few years, I've also been exploring my queer identities a lot, and therefore I have been advocate of the rights for the queer people and what mental health looks like and safety looks like for the queer folk. Yeah.
All right. All right. Thank you, man. Thank you. What about Charles? Can you just tell us about uh, your
Okay. Hi, guys. Thank you for having me on this show. Lovely to meet Lloyd and Rahel again and be in conversation. Look forward to this. And I'm Charles, for those that don't know me, and I am a physical therapist by core training with a specialty in cardiopulmonary physical therapy. My interest in studying the human body took me also to study a bit of the human mind. So I have another master's in psychology as well, and I have worked as a clinician and researcher and lecturer in Christian Medical College and Hospital, Vellore, for about 10 years. After that, I got a little interested in exploring the mind body connection and deeper things on spirituality. So I'm currently pursuing my master's in apologetics from Biola University, nearing completion. And yeah, so right now I'm working for an organization called Reasons to Believe, which is an organization that tries to speak on matters of faith and answer all the big questions of life, like origin, meaning, morality, and destiny. So that's a long intro. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, okay. So the people who are watching, just wanna tell you something even before we start the discussion. So we're not here to bash each other. We're not trying. We don't want to have a fight or an argument. If you are here, if you're going to expect that, I'm really sorry. We're just going to disappoint you. We're not here to do that. So it's not going to be a debate. It's going to be a dialogue between all of us. It's going to be a trialogue. So we're just gonna jump into the session now. So have some questions for Charles and for Rahel. So I'm just gonna shoot these questions and then let's see how it goes. So first question that I have for Rahel. Rahel, can you just tell us more about the queer movement and and yeah, from your experience, yeah, can you just tell us more about that?
The queer movement has been around for a while, since like the 1920s, perhaps even earlier. There have always been protests and riots that have been mobilized across the globe in some form or the other, asking for basic human rights. And but a landmark historical event in 1969 was the Stonewall riots that happened in Manhattan, and which happened in June, which is why June is considered to be Pride Month. But our past has been very queer. Temples and caves, temples have shown like sculptures of like queer gods engaging in like homosexual activities from like time immemorial. So I believe the past has been very queer, present continues to be queer, very future will continue to be very queer. But it's disheartening to know that despite years of protests, many people still continue to lack basic housing, being denied education, being denied the right to their identity, to even have a government form in their name, to not being able to marry the people that they want to. Section 377 was only recently decriminalized, and even the Nalsar judgment was passed recently, which brings some degree of hope for the queer community in India. But again, there are very, very disheartening events. We recently saw a very, like a lesbian couple from Kerala being separated by their parents, and the Kerala government had to bring them back together, which is the bare minimum, really. So while physical safety remains to be a continuous threat for the community, I'm glad that the movement has gained a lot more momentum and continues to gain a lot more acceptance. Um, yeah, and I hope the world can be a safer place. Yeah, so that's where it is.
Right, right. We really want to define these words even before we get into the discussion. So that's the reason why I just wanted to ask. So, what's your understanding of this word queer? Or yeah,
So the term queer is largely an umbrella term for anyone who comes along under the LGBTQIA
yeah.
community, um, differentiating between gender and sexuality. Well, we're born with a certain sex. The human body can be male, female, or intersex simply based on the genitalia with which we are born, and medically we fall under these three. So our sexuality would be whom we are attracted to, either romantically or sexually, and we could be attracted to either people of our own gender, of different genders, of various genders. And then our gender, what our gender is largely a very social concept. It comes down to how I feel. Do I wake up? Do I feel like a woman? Do I feel like a man? Do I feel non-binary? Do I feel agender? Do I not experience gender at all? All of these are on very fluid spectrums, and we could be falling anywhere along that spectrum. We could be changing what we feel on a daily basis simply based on how I'm experiencing it that day. And so anything out of this binary, anything out of the binary that there is a man and there is a woman, would be the queer community, who are trying to establish that there is no rigid idea of man and woman, and you could be anywhere along that line. And even nature sees homosexuality. A lot of animals engage with like same sex intercourse. A lot of animals are seen to shown to experience transsexuality. They show behaviors that are actually in fact displayed by the other sex. So this is just taking the boxes off is what the queer community is trying to do. We're saying no, like stop putting like boxes around this. We're just like one fluid community, and it's not a choice. Essentially, it's not a choice. It's something that we simply are. So
Right.
yeah, that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, thank you, man, thank you. So I'm gonna, so when I'm gonna ask a question, anyone can just jump in, and if I'm gonna ask a question to Rahel, Charles can just jump in and share his thought. And same way, if I'm gonna ask a question to Charles, and Rahel can just jump in anytime she wants to. So yep. So Charles, you wanna add or ask anything to Rahel before we?
Yeah.
Very quickly, Rahel, I liked your response, and I think very appropriate that you spoke about the oppression that's been happening to this community historically. But something that piqued my interest in your definitions, Rahel, is about the idea of gender being a social construct. And I know the APA defines gender or gender identity that way, and I think that is an authority, center when we are beginning to define terms. And but my question again is: so are we then pitting a sociological definition vis-a-vis a biological objective definition, and um, how 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 appropriate is that?
So, if I'm hearing your question correctly, it is um, I'm separating sex and gender though.
Sure.
And I'm saying gender as a construct is very psychosocial. There is no basis for it in the body. However, for most, for sorry, not most, for a lot of people, the basis of their sex could lead to the experience of their gender. For cis people, they were assigned male, they were raised male, they were socialized and they were brought up in male ways. And that could be a huge factor in why they're experiencing the identity of the fact that I am male. But that's when it comes down to that. That's when we look at like trans people who were assigned a certain sex at birth, were raised a certain in one of the binaries, say like male itself, but they were experiencing something very different altogether. They could not relate to how they were socialized, how they were dressed, how they were made to present themselves. And gender also comes down to expression, it comes down to a presentation, it comes down to how I'm socialized, how I'm feeling it. So I guess all these are very so psychosocial. So yeah, I'm separating it from the biology itself. Yeah.
Yeah, sure, sure. So now I have a question for Charles. Um, so it's going to be a, I don't know how you're going to answer this. So question is, does the Bible see homosexuality as a sin? And does it see it as natural, or is it some kind of man-made thing?
Okay, that's going for the jugular right away. Huh? You're not even giving any time to ease into the whole thing. So, okay, so you're asking me about the Bible and the way it looks at the queer community, or the practice of sexuality per se in that community,
Yeah.
isn't it? Right. So I'll have to probably step back a little bit, and maybe also try and speak on certain operational definitions that we might have to understand here before I unpack it.
Sure.
Because it's a very laden question, and it's very loaded, and I don't want to just appear too simplistic or very flippant and irresponsible in the way I address it. So, as a Christian, by conviction and persuasion, I am a person that has been taught and that has come to recognize and realize that I have a meta narrative, a grand story of the unfolding of the person and nature of God, and his attributes and his characters, and the way in which he created us, not just humans but the rest of creation, and his role, his intimate role rather, in the way humans are living, and his redemptive role in the person of Jesus Christ, and his promise of new heavens and new earth. That's the Bible in 30 seconds for you. So I am a Christian, and I am committed to living by the book, which happens to be a guidebook of sorts, I like to look at it as a manual to live by, or a better way to put it across than to look at it as a guideline or a manual, is God's unfolding love story towards all of His creation, especially to humanity. So, when I am trying to answer this question that you've asked me, Lloyd, about what the Bible thinks about homosexuality or the queer community or homosexual practice, I love to tell you that in God's original plan and in the way Christianity or the Christian worldview or the biblical worldview is designed, we see four pillars in the Christian worldview. The first pillar is the pillar of creation. The second one is a pillar of fall. The third one is a pillar of redemption. And the fourth one is a pillar of restoration or consummation, where all things are made right again. So the Bible teaches me that when God created everything and began His creative enterprise, He created everything to be good, 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 good. And on the final day, when He made us humans, He said it is very good. So everything seemed perfect and pristine until this time when there was something that was forbidden for man to do by God, His creator, and man went ahead and chose to do that particular thing. And that's what the Bible calls as the second pillar, which is the fall. And along with the fall, the Bible teaches there is this entry of sin into this otherwise perfect world. And the idea of sin, the idea of sickness, and the idea of death, and all things good spiraling downwards begins from there. And in the narrative that the Bible teaches us, Jesus Christ comes as that sinless Lamb of God that will pay for the sins of the world, so that the broken relationship between man and God would be restored by the merit of His sinless life, and thereby we go scot-free. And finally, we are today living in times in a fallen world, waiting for the day of ultimate redemption. And in the new heavens and new earth, paradise would be regained, as it were. So I painted to you a broad picture of what the Bible teaches and what the biblical worldview teaches any follower of Christianity. And it is in this second pillar that all of human rebellion and all of human lack of trust and all of human sin is actually positioned very neatly in a theological sense. And so, in God's original plan of creation, He wanted man to thrive, He wanted man to flourish, He wanted man, when I say man, humanity, He wanted us to live maximally, and He wanted us to be supremely loved and also love each other. Now, when sin came into the equation, that is when everything went awry. And what you're asking today, as does the Bible sanction homosexual behavior? My answer has to be no, in God's original intended design and plan for maximal human thriving. And that's a long-winded answer, but I had to say all of that to be able to qualify why I'm saying what I'm saying as a Christian.
Okay, thank you for sharing that, Charles. So, if the Bible see homosexuality or being queer as a sin, is that also a personal interpretation? Is that governed by your school of Christianity? I understand that there are various schools, like some are Orthodox, some are like Protestant, Catholic. Does the um, does how Christianity perceive homosexuality or the queer community change from sect to sect, from school to school?
Good question, Rahel. Let me again step back a little bit and give a context. I just remembered I didn't say something very important, and I took the bait and dived directly to the homosexuality behavior and question. The Bible very categorically says that from the time of Adam, when he disobeyed or when he chose to do that which was not maximally best for him in the eyes of his creator, that all human beings sinned. And what we are speaking today is perhaps one facet of human sinfulness, which is, sexual sins. But the Bible is very clear that all of us have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. When we speak about human brokenness, when we speak about human sinfulness, when we speak about depravity and all of that, we need to understand that it is not a us versus them kind of a categorization. Everybody, so to say, is sailing in the same boat according to how the Creator perceives it. And so I could be sinful in the way that I am jealous about somebody, in the way that I am greedy, in the way that I'm not sharing something, in the way that I am perhaps not loving enough, or serving enough, or being compassionate enough, or being empathetic enough. You can add a whole lot of stuff to that. And so, when you specifically come to the question of sexual sins, it doesn't mean that everybody that is a heterosexual is, in some ways, a saint per se, right? And all of us are sexually broken because all of us are fundamentally sinful. We sin because our first parents sin, and sin entered the world through them, and we are born into sin, and therefore we sin. So, zooming in from a larger perspective and narrowing down to the question of homosexuality and whether Christianity across the board sees it as sin, most of mainstream Christianity that is committed to believing and interpreting the Bible would not have a problem in saying that God's original design for human sexuality was one man for one woman. And then there is sin that came along the way, and there's a lot of distortion that perhaps happened. There are, having said that, certain pockets in Christianity that do go a long ways in trying to interpret certain passages in the scripture that speak about homosexual behavior, not in the light of how mainstream Christianity seems to present it. They seem to sanction it, they seem to even go to lengths to argue that it is actually not wrong for somebody to be a homosexual, and there is really no conflict or contradiction between homosexual behavior and being a disciple of Jesus. But that, I would like to say and qualify, is not part of a mainstream interpretation of the key texts in the Bible.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And it's so that's this is more of a rhetorical question. I want to move on to the next question, but this is a problem that we have with like all religious faiths, really. When you say even before we sinned, that there was only man and woman, that there was the conception of that binary started there. And what makes us think of that person as a man, what makes us think of that person as a woman, is the question that we are asking right now when we're trying to unpack gender. And bigger questions being, yes, if we've all sinned and if we are all on the same um, level playing ground of sin, the larger the question we'd have is, why is someone's queer identity a bigger sin than than a cis person's, than a heterosexual person's, if
Well,
we're sinning along the same lines? And but I mean, you did answer that a bit, but yeah,
okay.
geopolitics is different.
Okay, now I have a question. So I have a question for Rahel, and then I'm just gonna ask. Yeah. Okay. So the question is, does the queer community stereotype Christians as homophobes?
So it's not a stereotype, but it's a fear, a generalization that's based in a lot of fact-based fear. There are, I'm not denying that there have been churches that have been like accommodative of the queer community, that have openly supported the queer community, but sweepingly there are religious institutions are enforcing of the binary, are enforcing of heterosexual marriages. So many religious institutions openly come out and say, no, we're not going to make room for same-sex marriages, which has a bearing on the governmental policies as well, have had in the past as well. No, it's not a stereotype, but no denying that there have been, even so many churches have been the ground of attempts at conversion therapy, at like trying to straighten a person again who's come out as homosexual. Churches, mosques, temples. I'm saying here we're talking about churches, but we're going back to Adam and Eve. We're saying, when you're saying no, no, you can't be non-binary because there is only Adam and Eve. That would hurt us deeply. And also, I have one second. I was also reading again. Pardon my pop culture understanding of the Bible. It's only based off of the internet, and do correct me. But to see homosexual acts or people as like wanting as a temptation, as something that is something that should be contained within a marriage, feels very um, wrong for us, because the idea of queer love is that we're breaking patriarchal ideas. We're breaking ideas that say this man, husband, wife. Yeah, we're trying to move beyond that. So the more any institution tries to say, no, you're supposed to be engaging with love that's only contained within a marriage, that's only about man and woman, that it's a temptation, all this makes us feel belittled. So I'm not saying no, it would be wrong to say that your faith makes you a homophobe, but it would be very refreshing to see Christians coming out in allyship. Yeah.
Right. Charles, do you wanna say something before we?
No, I definitely hear what you're saying, Rahel, and the earlier one was a rhetorical question, and so I don't want to answer that. It's more of a statement, but perhaps later on in the conversation we might be coming to a place where some of us see certain kinds of sins to be more monstrous than the others, which in my view, I have a kind of a different view and take on that, and I'm not with the majority on that. And yeah, so I'm glad that you are not stereotyping, and that you kind of clarified what your understanding of the church is, and that there are different pockets of people, and there are different groups that perhaps is accommodating. And I again do hear that this for you is a difficult thing. It's more like a fight for your space, a fight for your ideology, which perhaps has been hierarchically, very, very oppressive. And I do hear very clearly those points that are coming across. But I hope to catch up on and touch on those things as we go along.
Right, right. So, and I'm going to ask a question to Charles. It's just that, this question is not just from me, it's even from my friends who are part of the queer community. The
Mhm.
question is just that, does Christians accept and make way for the queers?
Absolutely, absolutely. And if there is one worldview of faith that is maximally or completely inclusive, it will be the Christian worldview. Because when we study the person of Jesus Christ, the very mission of Jesus coming into this world, the Son of God becoming a Son of Man, is to seek and save and to restore and to give us a hope and a future. And there are several narratives in the gospel. I don't know if Rahel is familiar with any of these stories, but some very popular ones where Jesus, time and again, seems to be crossing several cultural barriers of that particular time and age. So much to the shock of religious leaders around him and his own disciples. There are several times that he goes and approaches people that are struggling with certain things, and he initiates conversations and he introduces himself as the truth and the way and the life. So, if you're asking a question, is Christianity inclusive in that sense of welcoming and accepting people of all persuasions? The answer is a very, very resolute yes. Because all of humanity, as I told earlier, is fallen and is broken. Some are heterosexually broken, the others I would like to assume are homosexually broken, and some are struggling with the question of who am I and their identity. Some are struggling with their own pet peeves, or some are struggling with several things, including things deeper at a heart level that many on the outside would not even be able to perceive. I can actually have a lot of stuff going on in my heart or mind, but be telling all the right platitudes on the outside, and it'll never even show. And so there are sins at various level, and sin is such a thing that has this way of going to the deepest recesses of a person's heart. And several of us are experts at perhaps brushing it under the carpet or putting on a mask and hiding. And so, if you're asking, is Jesus a welcoming Jesus? Is Christianity, or the religion or the worldview that tries to emulate what Jesus taught, a welcoming religion? My answer is a very, very resolute yes. But if you ask me the question of the methods of salvation, then my answer to that is Christianity is very, very exclusivistic in the way it presents, the object of its salvation, which is the person and the finished work of Jesus Christ. It says there is no other way for man to be able to reach God, but only by this person of Jesus Christ. It's exclusivistic in its mode of entry, but it's very inclusivistic in its audience and followers.
Right. Do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for clarifying that, Charles. It is very refreshing. I am not going to lie. And but I have two doubts to further your what you just said. The first being, so if it is inclusive in its purview, in what it is as a faith, does that mean I can still be a non-Christian, a non-believer, a queer person, and I will still be on the receiving end of love and kindness and acceptance and respect?
The last part of your question again, Rahel, sorry.
So
Can I
if
be a queer person and still be at the
So, can I be non-believer? Can I be a non-Christian? Can I be queer and still be on the receiving end of love and kindness and respect from Christians?
okay, from Christians or from Christ? Though those are two very different things. Not
From
all Christians
Christians.
are Christ-like,
Yes.
and from Christians.
From Christians. Yes.
Oh, that will be a difficult one, and I cannot speak for all of them. But if you were to ask the question Christ, my answer again would be in the affirmative, because Jesus wants everybody to come to him from all persuasions, and that is one of the reasons he came down. He's not saying you need to do such and such and clean up and be like this or that to be able to even enter. He's saying, come to me as you are, And when you meet me, there is going to be some transformation that happens. Okay, so to come to the person of Jesus Christ, there are no qualifiers. All of us that are sick, and all of us that are tired, and all of us that are weary, and all of us that are oppressed and broken and battered and bruised and ill-treated, mistreated, abused, everybody can come. And that is the beauty of the inclusiveness of Jesus Christ. And I don't know if you have heard the story of the prodigal son, which is a very common story of a person who kind of went and did his own pursuits and experimented on the pleasures of life. And then when he comes back, the father receives him, or rather runs to him with arms open wide to receive him. But once the holiness of God meets the fallenness of man, Christianity or the Bible teaches us that there is a supernatural way in which we will be impacted by the holiness of God, and that we will be transformed.
And I think that the response to that, I think, will be touched upon again in as the conversation proceeds. But the last question I had to your previous response was, when you say that sin happened to all of us, and we have all we're leading a life of sin. Um, does it only talk about aspects of my identity that are chosen, or aspects of the identity that I am born with? So, if you said things like jealousy, envy is sin as much for you as much as like my queerness is sin for me, my queerness was not a choice. But perhaps you choosing to be jealous, or you choosing to engage in some maybe violent activity is a choice. So does the sin encompass aspects that are chosen, of volition by man, or just everything?
Okay, that's a good
E- e-
question.
yeah, I think
Lloyd?
even before Charles answers the question, I have a question for Rahel. So, Rahel, what is your idea of human personhood or identity? And is it just limited to sexuality, or is there more to it?
Um, it's not just limited to sexuality, for sure. That would be reducing the grandness of what we all bring to the planet. And I couldn't. And this brings me to Kimberly Crenshaw's work. She's a black um, activist who presented the idea of intersectionality back in the day, which becomes the basis of feminism to this day, which helps us understand that there are multiple layers to our identity. I am not just my choices, my likes, my dislikes, but I'm also the caste I'm born into, the religion I'm born into, my gender, my sexuality, geopolitically, how I'm placed, racially, how I'm placed. And I'm my talents, my abilities, my disabilities. So many aspects govern my identity, and that's why we give it a very intersectional lens. Now, why is the queer community going on and on about gender and sexuality? Is because such an integral part of an identity, which was never a choice, which was something we were born as, was erased for so many years. Because of that purposeful erasure is why we are putting it on a pedestal now, and we're making it such a huge part of the lives that we lead. For the blacks who were oppressed, their race was such an integral part of their identity. For the Dalits who were oppressed, their caste location was such an important part of their entire lifetime, because it was purposefully erased. And because of that erasure, and because of the fact that people could treat it as a choice, is why we're making such a big deal out of it. In all honesty, the queers, it's not like we want to every day lecture people about, hey, this is what gender is, this is what sexuality is. We want to lead an everyday, we want to lead the most normal lives on the planet, a safe life. But we are forced to put ourselves out there every single moment and be like, hey, give me basic rights because this is my identity. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Hey, thanks, Rahel. Thank you for clarifying that. Now, Charles, do you?
Yeah, I have a little bit of a question there in one of the statements you made, Rahel. And thing is, you were saying now, and during an earlier response, that it's not a choice. It's not a choice. This is the way I am born. And But I am seeing a lack of a neat fit in your definition of gender, and which is a social construct according to you and APA, and you are saying I am born this way. So born this way to me is biology. Uh, Feel this way to me is gender identity. So can you just clarify on that?
By thank you, that's a great question, really. And by born this way, I'm honestly talking about the how I experience the world, how I see my identity that comes from within me. In personally speaking, that I would I would give it the same weightage as biology. Whether my chromosomes have it encoded or not, but it's coming from inside of me. It's not like I ate pineapple on pizza and I learned that I like pineapple on pizza, but more like I always knew that I like pineapple on pizza. Was that something that was genetically coded? I don't know. I don't have the scientific backing to answer that. But was it something that I knew from day one? Yes. Was- Is it still being influenced by external factors? Yes, I'm not denying that. But for the best part of it, it comes from within of me, and I think that's proof enough. That's validity enough, is what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Um, so a small doubt. Uh, I'm just gonna ask that. Yeah. So Rahel. So is there a possibility that that I feel this way today, as in I feel like someone today, and tomorrow can I be some other person? Is that possible? I'm just yeah.
Most certainly, and that's why um, that's the idea of gender also, because it's such a fluid spectrum. Today, I could be experiencing the gender of being a woman, and that's a personally speaking, that's a personal struggle for me. And some days I feel like a woman, and some days I feel very agender as a person, which is I hardly experience. It's not like I wake up and I'm like, oh, I feel like a woman or a man or non-binary. I simply feel like I don't experience gender at all. Do I present myself in multiple ways? Yeah, sure. And some days I'm wearing shirts, some days I'm wearing dresses and this and that. But my experience of it, absolutely, and there is room for change because it's that fluid. Even nature shows that. No, even plants show it, animals show it. On some days, if we were classifying behaviors, that is, on some days they're perhaps the one that is attracting the mate. On some days they're the ones that are perhaps going for the hunt, and some days they're not going for the hunt. And um, I'm saying yes, there is room for feeling, changing how you, whom you like, what you are as a person. And the idea of fluidity is simply just that. Yeah, there is no box, no, to begin with.
Right.
Interesting. Yeah, Lloyd, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a follow-up question. Is just
Okay.
that what are your thoughts on removing sex organs and along these lines? Where you feel this way today, and you feel some other person tomorrow. If that's the case, can I keep on changing, and can I keep on removing and adding these things? As in, I just want to know what are your thoughts.
Yes, and that's a common question also. Thank you for asking. Two things. One, um, removing of a person's, if for people who are born with intersex bodies, that is both genitalia and one being less developed, and unless it's a threat to the child's life itself, removing of that because you want to raise the child in one of the binaries is a human rights violation. But once the person is like, have like a person of their own, an adult, a fully grown adult who makes their own decisions, we start calling them gender affirming surgeries. That is, if today I feel more affirmed if I had a penis, then I go for a gender affirming surgery. And as opposed to like someone, a penis owner who feels more affirmed if they had it removed and had a vulva, then they go in for that. But I understand the repercussions of what might happen. Ek to one, it's a very expensive procedure. It's a very painful and expensive procedure. It is so painful and it involves so much money that one would have put a lot of thought, a lot of their life's decisions into it. Simply, it is shaping your life itself, and one can only imagine how monumental that must feel. And at the same time, fully respecting the idea that maybe a few months into the surgery, the person feels like, you know what, this is not it. It is purely that choice must also be respected, because at the end of the day, this is also a one saying yes, it's a fluid thing. And if they went back, if it's not a threat to their life, they'll perhaps go back for another surgery. And but I am certain that when one goes for such a life changing decision like this, when they have thought it through entirely. But yes, if they chose to revert back, that is fully to be respected. That's the person choosing to lead a more affirmative life.
Sure, Rahel. But here, in our effort to be gracious and compassionate and empathetic, are we actually not bordering on perhaps doing a lot of harm, especially emotionally, if not bodily, when we advocate for the idea of sexual fluidity? I do understand, since I'm from a medical background, the question of intersex and what happens there. But what happens to a trans person who, undergoes a sex change surgery today, and then down the line, a few years later, regrets having done that and perhaps wishes that he hadn't done it? And so, in our effort to be gracious and accommodative and quote unquote non-judgmental or empathetic, aren't we getting ourselves and others too much into a space where they later on individually struggle with the consequences of the idea of fluidity of gender? These could be anecdotal stray events here or there. Okay, these need not be large communities of lakhs of people having these narratives. It could be just one person, and still it would be a formidable issue for us who are on the side, let's say, of advocacy, to think this through. And it appears to me as if that while we are championing the erasing of boundaries, okay, especially sexual boundaries or identity boundaries, to be specific, or boundaries of human sinfulness in a larger sense, we seem to be thinking that we are doing something very noble, but perhaps we are not, because boundaries are meant in some ways for our safety and for maximal meaning and thriving. And so my question again is, okay, I understand your argument from an intersex person's vantage point, but what happens to somebody who's undergone a sex change surgery, as a trans person, and later on wants to again? It's not easy, Rahel. I mean, I heard you say that they can go back into their, earlier thing. It's medically not possible for somebody who is not intersexed to have a sex change therapy and then again go back to whichever sex and have the external genitalia that they once had.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. And with my previous point, what I spoke before this, I spoke of it from
Sure.
a trans person's perspective only. The
Okay.
intersex perspective, I only spoke about like when the baby is just about born.
Okay.
I
Okay.
was
Sure.
talking
Sure.
about.
Sure.
I was largely talking about gender affirming surgeries only. I'm certain that it's not going to be easy to like go back and forth. And I'm also certain that when someone makes a decision like this, it's well thought through. It is something, if that much money and that much pain must be involved in order to feel a sense of euphoria, in order to, I'm sure it's not just like putting on makeup. I'm sure it's a It's changing the
It
entire
is.
way in which you walk, the clothes you wear, the way you sleep, eat, everything is going to change. You're going to be on meds for perhaps the rest of your life. I'm sure this is a well thought through decision. And there are also so something I also wanted to add was, um, in order to be called a trans person, and I believe a law for that has also just about been passed. You don't have to have undergone that. The trans bill, we're also fighting for that. You don't have to have had gender affirming surgeries. You can continue to retain your body as it is, because gender is something that is experienced. Changing your body is only one step ahead. That's only one step ahead, because gender is psychosocial. Being transgender only means I'm transcending beyond the gender that was assigned to me. I could continue to have breasts and a vulva and identify as a man, identify as a trans man, identify as non-binary. So as surgery is not necessary. It is only a step beyond that, that very privileged people have access to as well. So I fully understand. It's not easy. We could be putting our life at threat going back and forth and all, but I'm certain that it's a very well thought through decision. We also have affirming. That's also why we have other ways of feeling extremely affirmed. We Trans men use binders to bind their breasts because they don't like the idea of having breasts, or trans women could like bind their penises, or we also have for trans men, there are also toys of like strap-ons available if they want to, if that's whatever is making them feel a sense of gender euphoria is what we're going for, transcending beyond the gender that was given to me, surgery or not, irrespective. But I acknowledge the pain or the surgical complications that might be involved. But yeah, how many people are going through surgeries again? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Let's probably move on and
So, question is, what values or lessons or stories that, from the Bible uh, could be used to appeal to fellow Christians about the correct moment? So that's a question that friend Rahel sent. So just thought of asking that.
Sure, sure. I think the gospel per se, as I spoke earlier, has several caveats of Jesus encountering people that are struggling with their life of sin. Not specifically only sexual sin, but there are several areas where there are heterosexuals who are having multiple partners, and so on and so forth in the gospel narratives that Jesus tries to speak to, and help them realize that He is the way, the truth, and the life. And so, in a larger sense, Jesus comes to save the lost. He comes as a savior, He comes as a redeemer, knowing full well that all of us are sinful, whether we are heterosexual or homosexual, whether we are doing overt sins or covert sins, whether we are doing sins of commission or even failing to do that which is good, which the Bible describes as being a larger, maximized definition of sin. And so anything, right, starting from, let us say, colored lies or lack of integrity, dishonesty, greed, envy, malice, slander, gossip, blah, 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 to the entire gamut of murdering somebody or, torturing babies, everything gets included in human sinfulness. But the category of sexual sin is specifically qualified in the Bible again, and there are several, incidents in the gospel narrative where Jesus seems to be encountering people, especially the adulterous woman and the woman by the well and the stoning of the adulterous woman and all of that. And he actually says that they are forgiven and that they will go and live and lead a new life and that they will not go back into their way of sinfulness. And so, as a person that is looking at the response of the Savior to human sinfulness in not a very specified homosexual slash heterosexual way, but in a very generic way of all humans having been fallen, there are ample examples of the Bible. especially in the Gospels, the person of Jesus. The second thing, specifically, that can speak into this community is that there is mention of the word eunuchs in the Bible, in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. And when Jesus speaks about the eunuchs in Matthew's Gospel, in the context of marriage and celibacy, he says some are made this way, some are born this way, some choose to be this way. What he's actually speaking about is an idea of a person being an asexual, because there is this tradition and culture in the far Near Eastern Near Eastern parts of the world, where somebody who is captured in war would be emasculated, and their testicles would be crushed, and they will lose, in some sense, their sexuality, and they become asexual. So while referring to these people, Jesus is saying some are made this way by their captors, some are born this way, asexual, some choose to remain celibate and restrain their sexuality in order to continue to serve God and devote all of their energies to the service of God. And in Isaiah, going back, there is a beautiful verse that says that the people who are eunuchs would deserve a place, or would be rather given a place in God's kingdom that is higher than the place that is given to sons and daughters. And so these are all passages that try to speak partly and not conclusively and exhaustively to this group, because there is a whole gamut here. We are speaking of our sexual attraction, which is sexuality, our gender identity, which doesn't have to do anything with our sexual attraction at all. We are talking about a genetic anomaly, which is an intersexed group of people that perhaps are the only group that can medically say, I am born this way, because that's a genetic birth anomaly, which is objectively verifiable externally and internally, in external internal anatomy, and also chromosomally and hormonally. And so there is a big gamut that we are speaking here, and the Bible unfortunately doesn't speak to all of these various categories and layers, but it does mention eunuchs. And the meaning of eunuchs in the way that the Bible uses is somebody who is asexual.
Anything to ask?
That was a lovely response. Thank you, Charles, for like quoting from the Bible. It's nice to see its representation in the Bible. The atheist community also sees a lot of erasure. The asexual community sees a lot of erasure in within the queer movement itself. So you brought up a point of intersex people being a group that can be verified as being born a certain way because there's like biological proof. So do you Lloyd and Charles, do you both identify as men, like you feel that your genders, and you're both
Yes.
like cis het men?
Yep.
Yeah. So, if you weren't told from say imagine a world where we're all born with our sexual respective sexual organs and all of that, and we were all raised in ways that didn't keep telling you that you're a man, you wear blue color clothes, you wear shorts, you wear shoes, you go to this particular school, you go to this, you use this particular washroom. There is so much socialization from the moment we're born till our marriage and even beyond, that we're constantly told what we are. So if that was never reiterated to you constantly, do you think your how else would you have verified to yourself that yeah, I'm a man?
Hey,
What
that was a
makes
good
you
question.
so
That was a
sure?
good question. Yeah, now I'm excited too. Hear what Charles has to say.
Biologically, because that's the least confusing, Rahel. See, the question that you asked actually cuts both ways. And it is possible for, let's say, a boy or a girl to be time and again affirmed by parents and, the context that he is a boy and he has to like blue, she's a girl and she has to play with Barbie dolls, blah, blah, blah. But the reverse can also happen. There are several examples of families that have longed for a girl child, but lo and behold, they had a male child born. And there are parents that have gone and celebrated their children and dressed them up like girls just because they so wanted to have a girl. And I have a photo of myself when I was 2 years old, or maybe perhaps one and a half, or I don't know, black and white photo of myself dressed up in a little bit in a silk sari. And I have a sister who's 6 years older than I, and they in fact even grew my hair, and I'm trying to redo that again a bit. This time the purpose is different. I'm trying to just cover my bald patch on top, but nevertheless, I could argue for, people do not always cry into my ear that you're a boy, you're a boy, you're a boy, think like this, behave like this. No, there are counter perspectives as well, and there are families that raise girls as boys because they've always wanted a boy. And so it's an argument that cuts both ways, and we cannot really say that it only benefits one group. Perhaps the percentage of how many people do this is lesser from your vantage point, and it is greater from how you see it across the board. And so, if you ask me, and I'm somebody who likes to think in neat categories, and that can be a blessing and a curse. So we tend to try and systematize things. So I'm a very objective person. So if you ask me a question about how do you know that you are man, Charles, then I would have to revert to something objective, something that is a gold standard that I can look up at, I can get myself tested. It's wired in my system. Okay, and even the argument of, let's say, the intersex people saying I'm born this way could very well be an argument of somebody who is male who can say I am born this way. And so these arguments that are used to actually settle or shut a case are arguments which are double-edged. It's like a double-edged sword. It cuts both ways. And it affirms each of our position and consolidates it actually more, depending on who first brings it up. And so the question is, I will revert to something that is more objective. When I need to know that a particular line is short or crooked or long, I always have to have a reference line to compare it with. There has to be a fixed gold standard. In medicine, we call it as gold standards. We ought to have gold standards to be able to see if the other is different, if the other is, something else. Yeah.
Okay. I hear you. And like you said, a lot of, in fact, a lot of, before the colonizers came, a lot of Indian culture was rooted in
Yes.
a lot of gender fluidity. Trans people were embraced wholeheartedly. Um, Homosexuality was rather embraced. I mean, it's all like white louis. But yeah, I truly do believe that if for medical purposes, yes, look at what's inside people's pants. Put it very crassly. I am extremely sorry. I just meant it like that. But as an experience of an identity itself, I truly believe that we are so much more than the
Sure.
parts that we are born with.
Sure.
And also, there was a response to the, I believe, Lloyd, you're going to have to cut this and paste this earlier, but I completely missed. Charles had asked about the emotional repercussions, the damage that comes with trans people going for gender affirming surgeries, and if by erasing boundaries, we are putting them at ourselves at a greater risk. And the response to that particular part.
Can I reiterate the question, please? My struggle was with the idea of fluidity being celebrated as something that is very liberating and virtuous. My question is, well, for some people, for some time. Now, what if the same fluidity turns around, several years later on me, and I so regret the physical decisions that are irreversible that I took in that state of fluid flux? And I'm trying to point in a very logical way that, okay, fine, fluidity, okay, you want to look at it as a virtue, you want to celebrate it, you don't want to, be boxed up, all very well and fine. But what if this fluidity thing, which is fluid, turns around the very next day after I have spent hours contemplating on the decision and I've been affirmed by friends and community around, and that moment has been celebrated, and then again, I realize that perhaps I should go back.
Got it. Thank you for clarifying as well. And one, for starters, um, it is a very monumental decision, a choice that a person's going to make in their lives. Yeah, I already spoke about that. It is something that they must have observed for years and years to be like, you know what, I am going to put this down, and all my money, all my effort, all the pain. I'm risking multiple surgical complications to go through this. So that must have been something that they must have truly felt from the moment that they were born. So it is highly unlikely that it's also going to flip around like overnight. But yes, it's also respecting the idea that because gender is such a fluid concept, it might turn around. Yeah. In cases like that, I would also like for you to. I'm not able to draw other parallels, but in in this patriarchal heteronormative society, the closest parallel I can perhaps draw is that of maybe marriage or childbirth. It is a huge something that we personally, our communities especially, see as a landmark happening. Yeah, I have chosen this person to be the love of my life. I'm committing to them by papers, by faith, by actions. I must have felt that love for a good while to be like, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna settle down with this person. The chances that I might fall out of love, that something really bad might happen, and I might go back on my decision is very likely. Is it still respectful? Yes. Is it going to cost me emotionally, financially, physically? Most certainly. Perhaps not still as much as what a gender affirming surgery might cost physically, but sure. Childbirth. Many mothers regret, many women, I mean, people who give birth regret uh, having children. Is it is it reversible? Absolutely not. They feel a lot of people are on the receiving end of a lot of harm from their own kids, and they're like, why even did I bring this misery upon myself and others? And is it costing me emotionally? Yes, but do I still have the choice of moving away, seeking maybe perhaps protection, separation, in every way possible? Yes. So that's the closest I could draw a parallel to, but yeah, that was the point.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you so much for that, Rahel. It's a good parallel, but I don't know how we are doing on time, Lloyd. If I can just make a footnote, a pushback on this, if it's allowed. So both of these parallels are costly, financially, emotionally, relationally, and can create a lot of havoc. And I'm glad that you granted that. But again, my larger point is that how many ever parallels we draw about monumental decisions that have the possibility of reversibility. The decision of reversing it should not be heavily reliant on our surging emotions from time to time. Okay, be it let's say a separation or a divorce, be it having a child and then wondering why I had one. My parents jokingly would say, we wonder why we had you. We had such a difficult time raising you. But we all say that, and in jest and fun. And there is also an underlying truth in that. But again, my argument is that our emotions and our emotional state is, that very well, Rahel, is not a flat line. It has got peaks and it's got troughs, even within a particular day. And therefore, if we put all our eggs in one basket and argue from the vantage point of emotionality, it's a very valid point. I've also, somebody who thinks in mind categories with my training, and I'm saying it seems so unsafe to me. It seems to have the possibility of serious repercussions and perhaps even very, very serious emotional and mental health damage. And so, why don't we want to, in some way, put our thoughts in something that is a little more objective, that is a little more unchanging, that is a little more fixed? We do not like things that are fixed. They are very drab, they are very boring, they're very old fashioned, and they seem to kind of limit us. But again, I think the cost benefits and the repercussions of putting everything in an emotional basket because of certain emotions at that particular point in time, be it marriage, childbirth, or the idea of gender and irreversible changes done to one's body image, is quite a thing that we are doing here. I don't know. Yeah.
I hear you. I hear you. And but I cannot speak on behalf of like every trans person there is, but largely on behalf of the queers, I think we're willing to put all
Take
those
that right.
emotions in the basket
Okay. 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 Sure.
in order to lead a more affirming life. Yeah.
Sure. Right. So we're just gonna close this right now. Even before we close this, so each of you can ask one final question. Okay, one final question, and the person who's going to respond to it will have 2 minutes.
That
Who
two
wants to
minutes is
start
for
that?
me. I know. I know. Yeah.
So who wants to start it first?
I'll
Rahel.
ask first. Yes.
Okay, right. Okay, your time. Okay, yeah. Oh, you need to ask
Okay, so my question for you, Charles, is if I'm an unrelated, a stranger, yeah, I am a non-believer, I'm an atheist, a staunch atheist, a trans person, I am gay, and if I chose to, will I be and I have no and I'm not interested. I'm not leaning towards becoming following the Christian faith or becoming Christian. But given this is my stance, this is my identity, will I be respected and accepted by the church?
By the church.
By the
Okay.
church.
By the church is very dicey, because, as you said, the church has different flavors, different layers, and different denominations, and certain segments of the church, as you earlier said, will be very affirming and accepting and will allow you to continue to live the way you live. But the mainstream church, or the more orthodox church, would welcome you, definitely, as I said before. But they would encourage you to consider the person of Jesus Christ, and that they would hope that you would conform to his image, the image of Christ. I mean, not in terms of sexuality, but in terms of uh, how you live your life out as a disciple of Jesus Christ. And so that's all I can say about the church per se at large. And I've told you what Christ would do to you if you were interested in coming, and you know that, and that's my 2 minutes.
No,
Yeah.
just a minute.
Oh, just a minute.
Not even a
It's
minute.
only
Okay.
it's only I that think that I'm talking for too long. Is it?
Okay.
Clock doesn't think like that. Okay.
Right. Right. So,
Yeah, Rahel, it's a very painful question, Rahel. Let me say that in the 30 seconds that I have. It's a very painful question for me to hear that as a Christian, and in some ways, I am. I don't know if I can say that I'm disturbed by that question. It's a very legitimate question, and all kinds of brands and varieties of Christians have given various responses, and for the large part, I think in our zeal and passion, perhaps we have gone to the extremes and not known how to manage truth and grace well. But Jesus is absolutely welcoming, and he stands with arms open wide. And there is, and all of us are sinners in his eyes up until that point that we meet him. Then some transformation happens. Yeah.
time up. Okay.
Okay,
Good.
thank you, Charles. Thank you.
Okay, my question. Okay, let me read that.
Yeah.
This is the first time in the talk that I'm wearing my glasses to be focused. What is that one thing, Rahel, that Jesus Christ has to do for you specifically, not for the queer community, to accept Him as Lord and Savior? And what have I demonstrated that He already did that for you?
For me personally, and speaking as a queer person as well, but I particularly have no inclinations or leanings towards any supernatural force or a figure of God per se. I would personally simply like to lead my life as I am, without me having to change the way I am for bare minimum respect, for bare minimum safety. To be respected, to lead a dignified life is, I think, all I ask, and all anyone asks for, really. But I am, since I lean towards atheism and non-believing. I simply hope that, because I believe that my mind is the cause of all my victories and my failures. I face the consequence of the failures of the repercussions of my mind, and I bear the fruit of what I think and what I am as well. For me, the closest I can come to God is acts of compassion. And if that is seen everywhere, then that's my ideal of God. But I don't know if that entirely answered your question, though. But yeah,
Sure, sure. That's your response, and I respect that. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, man. Yeah. Right. You have 40 seconds more if you wanna. Okay, so that's for me, I guess. Then, all right. Thank you so much, Rahel, for joining us. Thank you so much, Charles, for. Hey, I'm so amazed to see how Rahel actually joined. Even though there are two Christians, and she was very gracious and she accepted our invite, and she joined, and she was very enthusiastic, and she was the one who really wanted this to happen. And
And,
just
and
want
this
to
is the
thank you.
second time we're doing this, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we're just doing it the second time, and the more conversations to go, I guess. Maybe we might do a part two, guys. So yeah, so
With,
even
with
before
one
we.
more with one more person from Rahel's side, just to make
Most
it easy.
certainly, most certainly. Many queers. This is actually, thank you, Lloyd, and thank you, Charles, for making this happen. I feel like there's this is so necessary. It is absolutely the need of the hour. At a time when we're all trying to come, we're envisioning a world of oneness, and the dialogues like this is what is making way for that. Not just loggerheads of, oh, you are bad because you hold that idea, but like, hey, this is us versus a certain idea of like hatred and all of that. And so it's very refreshing to meet Christians like you both. And yeah, I sincerely hope for like more brotherhood, more. Yeah, I can't find a gender neutral term.
Right, right.
Do you feel unequipped to talk to your friends about Jesus? Do you want to know more about God and His Word? Are you struggling with sin? And do you want to pursue a holy life? Then this channel is for you.